across the globe, from Scotland to China, with world's greatest tried video. Experience the breathtaking thrill and adventure of authentic train travel as you follow the tracks to each street, fascinating people, and breathtaking scenery. All of What are they waiting for? Who knows? It's hard to estimate just how many of them there are. 20 to 20 million, it is said. Drifters. Couldn't they land in the city? No, it's not that easy. Every Chinese citizen has a sort of identity card allowing him to work only in his place of residence. It's practically impossible to change it. This is how China has avoided the money of those sprawling peripheral zones which have become the scourge of cities in the developing world. But what will happen tomorrow if this itinerant population to 80 or 100 million forecast by some? We're off. We're leaving Beijing, traveling east toward the China Sea long petrified snake, the Great Wall. China, 9,572,800 square kilometers, 5,400 kilometers east to west, 3,900 kilometers north to south. 25,000 kilometers of border, 11,000 kilometers of coastline, officially 1,100,000,000 inhabitants. 1 out of every 5 inhabitants of our planet is Chinese, a country with no internal sea, whose rivers flow from west to east, making natural north-south circulation difficult. There are lots of roads, 980,000 kilometers, but only 18% can take trucks. Apart from some 2-lane roads, the rest might as well be to so many tracks, unmapped for part. As for highways, they serve only as exits for cities. Without its 57,800 kilometers of railway, what would China be like? For most of the country, nothing more than a junction of economically isolated provinces. 19% of the network has double-track lines. The rest, single-track. 11% of the net electrified, yet the government is investing heavily. 90% of transportation budget goes to the rail. Two categories, each with classes. You see is what you get. Hard seats and sleepers means wooden bench. Soft seats and sleepers, a padded bench. All the trains are packed. You need to reserve weeks in advance to get a seat. For people under this yoke for 20 years, liberalization also means satisfying hunger for travel. People to see what's going on in a place. The Chinese are by far the most numerous tourists in China. The restaurant, 4 cooks and 4 waitresses, as well as 4 waitresses in charge of the service. In all, 42 employees work in the 14-passenger train. There are 2 engineers, 2 assistant engineers, 1 ticket taker for each car, and 1 announcer call out the station. He also doubles as disc jockey and chooses the train's music. And all with hot dishes for the trolley. A waitress writing up the day's menu. Actually, Chinese don't eat different horses. They often order dishes that are practically whole meals in themselves. Rice, which is their equivalent bread, is served at the end of the meal. First class exists, but only in some areas. It is reserved for foreign tourists, high rankings, or for Chinese residents outside of China. They're pampered as they are big investors. And so we near the end of the line, the Great Wall crenellated outline against the summit. Dragon's Head is the name of this section of the Great Wall which juts out to sea. The dragon, emblem of Imperial China and the Emperor himself. The wall as a sort of shield, protection from the barbarous hordes trying to invade the country. The coastal plains were especially vulnerable, so the wall was even sturdier here. And yet, it's always an aesthetic aspect. By a temple appealed to the benevolent divinities that they might strengthen the will of the warriors. These same spirits were called upon to combat the enemy spirits from the northern steppes. Then up into the mountains, where the Great Wall, sinuous and powerful, stretches on and on. In China, it is known as the Wall of 10,000 Li. 1 li is about half a kilometer. That would make the wall 1,000 kilometers long. But perhaps we should interpret 1,000 figuratively, as gigantic or immeasurable. As a matter of fact, we should really say the walls. We are talking about a series of built fortifications which, though begun in the 4th century BC, were in continual construction until the 17th century. All in all, over the centuries, 50,000 kilometers of walls, greater than the Earth's circumference. It is said to be the only man-made edifice visible from the moon. Its average height is 7 to 8 meters. The roadway is 5 to 6 meters wide. Small forts are built approximately 150 meters, as well as towers. There are 25,000 forts, 15,000 towers. An elaborate system of defense with fortifications which could conceal reserve troops ready to counterattack. But in addition to its defensive role, the wall possesses a symbolic significance ingrained in the Chinese mind. The Great Wall separates the civilized from the uncivilized world. It is most a protection, represents a state of mind. On one side, discipline, the known, the measurable world. On the other, uncertainty, disorder, and ignorance. Man on one side, savage on the other. Has the war accomplished mission? The Maginot Line, the Atlantic Wall, also provides a false sense of security. Genghis Khan and the Mongol hordes did manage to force through at the beginning of the 13th century, only dissolved, engulfed, and digested by those they had conquered. The surprising strength of Chinese civilization is that each successive invasion resulted in the conquest of the victor and the reconstitution of the Union. Union, disunion, great fear. These men and women have come from all corners of the country to attend the ceremony of the colors, which takes place in Tiananmen Square. What have they really come for? Something beyond the ideal of a flag, the hope that this union will endure, that dissent will not afflict the lives. Tiananmen, celestial peace, it's the heart of the nation. Way to the Imperial Palace, where the Red Guard parades, and the tragic events of 1989 are not far away. Union is synonymous with the great dynasties. Han, 3rd century BC and 1st century D. Tang, 7th to 10th century. Ming, 14th to the 17th century. Qing, 17th to the 20th century. Disunion means rupture, breakup, the country to apart, and uprisings, repression, famine, invasion, and it's always the people. During the first half of our century, this ravaged the country, the era of the warlords and the Japanese invasion. The struggle between nationalists and communists, between Taishek and Mao Zedong. The most recent union dates from October 1st, 1949, with the creation of the People's Republic of China. Everlasting, the invariable Liang in written Chinese. The signifying character, Ni, character which cannot be conjugated, has no plural, no present, past, or future. It reigns. The immutable character, Middle, King, now, the Middle Kingdom. At one end of the square, memorial of Mao Zedong. It is open to the public on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 8:30 to 11 a.m. Historic statues glorify the memory of the Long March. 1935, the march, a 10-kilometer trek through territory, took a year. And every day there was fighting and death. And epic. Of the 100,000 men and women who started out, only 50,000 would arrive in Hanyang. From this isolated hideaway, Mao would conquer the entire country. How do the people feel today? He's respected, yes. The statue has been taken down everywhere. These, to take stock, figure that he was 70% good and 30% error, simply in regard to the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. A favorable judgment to all. But popular sentiment for Mao is strengthening. Now that he's no longer had to prove him, he has become a father figure, the man of union, of equality, even if gained at the price of poverty and enormous errors. He has also become associated with protective debates. Images of Mao are reappearing as a young revolutionary soldier and as of China. A taxi driver explains why though. The city of Dun, a terrible accident took place at certain crossroads. There were several and many others injured. The only car that wasn't damaged was carrying a picture of Mao. He has earned the privilege of figuring on banknotes with his companions on the launch. Under the ancient regime, any subject could post his pleadings on this column in the morning. At noon, a mandarin would deliver to the emperor, who said would resolve the case that very day, or legend. In any case, Tiananmen seems to be a mythical place where the Chinese have always gated. Arriving around the area of Tiananmen Square, we make a pilgrimage to the Forbidden Center of Imperial Authority, the residence of the sovereign, the guard of the Union. The Chinese have long understood that architecture is an element of power imposed on the people. It is represented here by the massive walls and doorways of the city. Isolated within, the emperor becomes an omnipotent individual, but invisible, mythical. Only those of the high rank were allowed access to the inner court. The threatening lion, symbol of the Ming dynasty. Under his clawed paw, he holds the world. The doors are studded with 9 nails, number 9, the imperial symbol. It is the last, therefore ultimate digit. Then come the numbers. The dragon, that fabled mythic animal. Born in the water depths, he lives his life in the firmament. He's married to the rainbow. Represents the hostile forces of nature. Tamed by the civilized influence of the sovereign, he becomes emperor, changing into a protective animal. Dragon is the trusty steed of poets and immortals, bringing them to cosmic space. During an eclipse, he gobbles up the moon. Only the emperor right to add the dragon's eyes to paintings and sculptures, thereby taming him. The inner court is dedicated to superb harmony. The river, which snakes its way under bridges of marble, represents abundance, life. No imperial was ever built which did not incorporate this symbol of fertility. Everywhere, the Forbidden City is studded with symbolic references. The stork, whose offspring always respond to her call, represents the son's fidelity to his parents. The tortoise, with its unfaltering solidity, is likened to the celestial vault. Only the emperor, seated in his palanquin, had the right over these dragons sculpted in the marble. The porters made use of the 2 stairways on either side. Symmetry. Yes. Supreme harmony. We turn a corner, and we happen on Palace Guard. And now back to Tiananmen. For us, the Great Hall of the People, the headquarters of National People's Congress. After all, we realize this country has an only child problem. The policy is one child rule, and that's that. Fecundity is punishable. For every extra child, a fine of about 10 months' salary and the loss of important social benefits. Peasants, however, have the right to a second child if the firstborn is a girl. We can imagine how easy it must be to tell that child. Soon there will be no more uncles, no more aunts, nephews, or cousins. What a revolution! And the social and economic implications are bound to be significant. The idea behind this policy is that a high birth rate will eat up any material. Birth control is necessary to improve the standard of living. Currently, the population is at a rate of 10 to 15 million per year. The aim is for zero population growth by the year D10, a risky future. The opens. This headquarters. Of the city's ring roads. The population of the Beijing area is 11 million, less than the 13 million inhabitants of Shanghai. The bicycle is also a symbol. Formerly a luxury, it was the promise of Mao's reform. A bicycle for every citizen. The price is kept very low, the equivalent of 10 to 12 days average salary. Nobody's trying to race, just poke along. It's a way of getting around, that's all. All of China, every avenue, every street practically, has a bicycle lane. All of heaven is the pivot of the imperial system. Only the monarch act as intermediary between heavenly powers and man. Here at the Temple of Good Hosts, twice a year at the solstice, after a 3-day fast, the monarch would pray. He prayed for a balance between sun and rain. There are things. One for the heavens, one for the emperor, and one for the people. Here on the marble altar of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, The monarch performed sacrifices and communicated with the cosmic forces. Again, symbolism is present everywhere, in the 3 levels of 9 steps. 9, the sovereign numeral. Present in the 9 circles of 9 stones, or multiples of 9. And center, the circular stone. The circle is the symbol of heaven. Finally, Imperial Beijing is palace. Everything is subdued here. This is 19th century China, which brought the collapse of a system which had run its 1911 gave birth to the Republic. This was where Zhi, the terrible empress, a priest emperor. Here he is as a bee, but the film version of the real thing. Here as a young. Is this the son of heaven, secluded beyond the high palace walls, powerful, unpro? Puyi, the dilettante, the delicate brill-creamed playboy, epitomizes just what had become the idea of a unified empire.
金湖悠悠，世事的那风，英雄于是早回头，夕阳西凉水的那东流，山岳的那黄秋。 的那黄秋，愁啊，笑去是酒。
Soon, nothing would remain but reflections. We're on our way to Xi'an to see the famous warrior statues, which have become legendary. Green tea. They drink it all day long. Never water, always tea, if it's cold. Tea will steep only in boiling water. If there are any microbes present in the water, a sure precaution against dysentery. The chest seem to have forgot. They say passion for green tea has to do with the flavor, its taste to the degree of water. This said beverage of the poor, known as white tea, is nothing more than boiled H2O. Illusion. This is a soft carriage. The passenger can travel all day long. Xi'an is a big city of million inhabitants. There's very little chance, except perhaps the city of Dragon. Today, it shelters second falls from the rain. Xi'an was 12-time capital of the Chinese Kingdom's empires, and remains south. The city still with the unhurried charm of life in another era. Things live at night. Open-air restaurants are everywhere. Food is very important to the Chinese. They eat all the time. This is a vestige from ancestral past. One famine followed another. Pans remain in the collective memory. Not so long ago, the ritual of eating in certain areas was "you eaten." This says a lot. Chopsticks date from pre-time, when man first learned to make use of fire. He removed food from the hearth to use inches, and to eat, he whittled the brush down to the size of chopsticks as we know it. Like pasta, ravioli, Chinese invention. They were brought to Europe in the 13th century by the Venetian Marco Polo. The shape is as important as the filling. Chinese cookery is aesthetic. Eating is an art. The meal should provide nourishment, but should also satisfy the five senses, and sight is not the least of these. Xi'an's specialty? 239 sorts of ravioli. Is that all? Unlike Western cuisine, preparation in Chinese cuisine is generally long and meticulous, and the actual cooking is quick. It's in keeping with the philosophy of the country. Deep meditation precedes action. Ethics above all. Mixtures of flavors which seem inconsistent to us really pushed to the limit. Caramelized potato. They're fried, then plunged for a few seconds into boiling sugar. The meal is a ritual. Here we are in Suzhou, a town which has retained the refined traditional Chinese customs. First, an beef. Bottom, kampai. How many dishes are on the menu? 12 is a good number, 12 months of the year. It's a symbol of good luck. It means we will eat all year long. The Zins decorate the table. Bamboo for springtime. The Chinese orchard for summer. The chrysanthemum of autumn. A flowering plum tree for winter. And storks to represent the guests loyal to each other. The crack of spring thunder satisfies fifth sense, hearing, neglecting all the other cuisines of the world. This mysterious dish, an interesting story. Once upon a time, there was a young student so poor and hungry that he stole a duck. He wrapped it in lotus leaves to hide it, quickly trussed it up to fire to cook it. At that very moment, armed horsemen arrived. Terrified, the student covered the whole thing up with earth. After cavalrymen left, the student quickly uncovered his duck to discover that it was braised in the fire's coals. He had just started to eat when the emperor arrived, very hungry. "I want your duck," he said to the student, who could do nothing but obey. Satisfied after his duck dinner, the emperor proclaimed he had never eaten all his life. Then he said, "He who knows how to cook well knows how to govern." And he appointed the student prime minister right then and there. "38 kilometers from Xi'an, sheltered from the elements under an enormous hangar, are the warriors of the dead army. 1,000 of these clay figures have been unearthed, and explorations carried out in the area indicate that there are some 6,000 buried, all in battle formation." Who are they fighting? A dead soldier can easily become a symbol, but these soldiers were born as a symbol. Their mission: to protect Shi Huang in the afterlife. Shi Huang Qin, the emperor of China, unified the land. Year 219 BC. Shi Huang, inflexible autocrat who put an end to feudalism, unified some measures, and created a standard for writing. He linked the existing military fortifications, thus founding the Great Wall. An enlightened, but he was also cruel and vindictive. He believed that man was fundamentally evil and that he was ignorant to protect the state, so no need for books. They were burned, and of scholars were buried alive. Swallowed by the earth, they leave no memory. For more than 2,000 years, this underground army lay buried, but in 1974, a peasant digging a well accidentally uncovered a head with his Was this phantom legion armed? So, a few spearheads and crossbows were found, but nothing more. It seems that the French army had been pillaged by a rebel general in the troubled years following the death of the emperor. One is astounded by the alignments, a great number. These 7,000 warriors bring to mind the 10,000 li Great Wall. Both figures seem so out of all proportion. And to think that man conceived both these wonders, one so fragile and the other seemingly indestructible. What a sense of grandeur he must have had. The figures measured between 1.75 meters and 1.98 meters, much taller than the average Chinese at the time. The horses measure 1.30 meters. They are horses from the steppes with wide muzzles and powerful lungs, well adapted to the long distance they had to run. The statues were painted. Military uniforms of the day were bright. The same colors were reproduced on the statues. It is believed that there was a large-scale industry of unimaginable proportions developed just for the fabrication of these statues. There were workshop molds for the bodies, others for the arms, still others for the heads. Such modern techniques, and in the year 220 BC. Detailed features were later added to the standardized head to personalize them. They're not those of automatons. They are warriors. Their expressions resolute, firm, courageous, ready to obey the orders that their powerful ruler sends them in the other world. In these mountains, Mongolia, the These are the lands that the nomadic troops swept down from in their quest for rich territory and descent, founding short-lived dynasties. We are headed for Dong, which was the capital of these barbarian empires. Datong is also an important coal field, one of the largest in the world. The Datong field provides 30% of the country's total energy production. This is the central which commissioned the contract of the century for the French company Alstom, an order for 300 engines. They're used in pairs to pull wagon loads of coal weighing up to 6,000 tons. Their maximum speed is 108 kilometers an hour, which is quite adequate for pollutants. Franco-Chinese collaboration was close. 100 Europeans came to work in China, 200 Chinese were sent. The very first engine delivered ran for more than 1 million kilometers. The entire fleet has done 100 million. And in the wings, these locomotives, which are fast becoming extinct. Take a good look at these minds that will bring out the child in all of us. Take a good look, because they will soon. The construction of these locomotives terminated in 1988, and they no longer operate on the major lines. They're employed on secondary lines, or used horses, or as we can see here, to bring the coal into the depot. The railway workers take loving care of them, for they know that these engines are in the death row. That's the law of productivity, also known as progress. But they want them to go out fighting, as powerful and impressive always been. In Datong, we find the exquisite vestiges left of the Wei dynasty, a series of remarkable sculptures in the Yungang cave. It is the 5th century. Chinese Buddhism is still in its infancy. It has completely assimilated the gentle doctrine and resonances particular. These statues are unrefined and austere. It is a young art. The sculptor seems surprised by the enormity of his task. He does not master the Buddha's smile in his rend, but he does succeed in his fierce affirmation of a faith. Entire cliff face is composed of niches. The soft stone is molded by the step-strong winds. The columns almost merge back into the rock face itself. At the beginning of the 6th century, a change took place. The style became more refined. Expressions took on an ineffable quality, reflecting the God's compassion for suffering humanity, one of the basic tenets of Buddhism. There are more than 50,000 statues, most of them badly worn. Work stopped in 525. It had lasted some years. The Wei, having continued their advance south, moved their capital. They were soon overthrown by another dynasty, but they were the first to make Buddhism the official religion. From monumental Buddhism to living Buddhism, a renaissance is taking place. A vital new energy is in the air. This pagoda of Lingying in Anzhou is one of the oldest in China. It was founded in 326 by a monk on his return from India, birthplace of Buddhism. Destroyed time and time again, built. Chinese governments have always had an ambiguous attitude toward Buddhism. This philosophy come religion has always bothered them because of its far origin. But Chinese people were won over by its doctrine of gentleness, which provided refuge in times of hardship. The Red Guard was always particularly severe with pagodas, bans on teaching, closures, destruction of religious objects. This year was new. The original was burned during Cultural Revolution. The cult of Buddha, originally so austere, has been humanized through centuries of superposition. The gods of heaven, contrary to all appearances, are revered as benevolent spirits. They scare destructive forces and protect Buddha as he meditates. A little boy being taught Buddhist rituals. Will China turn to spiritualism? No. The Chinese are very attached to material reality, but a page has been turned. The question is, will Maoism prove nothing more than a parenthesis in Chinese millennial history?
on the next World's Greatest Train Ride video.